Eyebrow piercings, pros, cons, advantages, disadvantages. Gonna give you 5 of each coming up right now. For those that are new to the channel, my name is DaVo. I'm a professional body piercer and have been since 1994. I'm the owner and operator of the Axiom Body Piercing Studio, located in Des Moines, Iowa, inside the lovely Skin Kitchen. So when I'm talking about these things, I'm talking to you from a level of experience of doing this over the last 2.5 decades. This particular piercing, actually having one myself and helping people through the healing process and the actual getting of the piercing and etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 5 pros, 5 cons, 5 advantages, 5 disadvantages, kind of educate you and give you enough information that I think that you could probably make a good decision on whether or not this piercing is right for you. So let's start out with the pros, the advantages. Number 1, this piercing has a long history of being a fairly easy piercing to heal. It is not prone to a lot of problems. It does take some care, just like any other piercing does, but it is not prone to having issues like other piercings may have. Number 2, I don't know what the click was about. Anyway, it draws attention to the eyes. It is kind of a flagpole, a way of drawing people into your eyes and drawing attention to it in kind of a subtle way. Number 3, can be done depending on the type of jewelry that you decide to wear. It can be very subtle and kind of elegant, or it can be very dramatic and very, hey, I'm here, I have the piercing, and I am the piercing. So it gives you that option, and there are a lot of jewelry options that are out there. Number 4, if done correctly, it should kind of fit or almost look natural to the anatomy. It doesn't distract from it. Some piercings can kind of be in-your-face kind of piercings. This one just kind of seems like it fits there. Number 5, doesn't seem, at least through my own experience and most of my clients that I've spoke to about this, doesn't affect sleeping as much as other piercings do, especially ear piercings, which if you're following the pros and cons, I've done a lot of lately. The piercing does need to be isolated like any other piercing, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but it doesn't seem to come in contact with bedding and etc. as much as, say, an ear piercing does, or even a nipple piercing or a navel piercing. The more front to the face is a little bit easier to isolate it and keep things away from it. So that was the 5 advantages. Now we're going to go on to the 5 cons, the 5 disadvantages. Number 1, has an undeserved, in my opinion, reputation for rejecting. This piercing, if it is done incorrectly, if it's done with the wrong jewelry, can reject. In a way, it is anywhere from a normal kind of lobal type piercing, where you have kind of 2 sides and you pierce through it, to almost a surface-to-surface piercing. And I'm going to get into that anatomy part next, but if they're done incorrectly, they will migrate or reject in some cases if the jewelry's incorrect. Like for a while, there was this trend of piercing them with straight barbells, which tend to put a lot of pressure on the piercing and create a situation, instead of the piercing healing through the tissue, it would create kind of a bump or like a tunnel sitting there on top of the tissue. They do leave scarring, so that is something you want to consider, and you need to talk to your piercer about whether or not you're going to be more prone to migration or not, or rejection, than, say, someone else. Number 2, and this gets into anatomy. The more pronounced the brow is, the better the success would be. If you take your thumb and your index, we all have at least, well, most of us have them, and pinch down on the tissue just above the eye, you will notice that there's kind of a fatty tissue that folds under, and it tends to be kind of on the thick side. The thicker and more pronounced that tissue is, the better your success level. If you're one of those people that it's almost flat or there's just nothing there, you're going to be more prone for this piercing to reject. I'm going to, if you came into my studio and talked to me about getting the piercing one of the things I'm going to do is check your anatomy. And if I don't think it's correct, I'm going to say, well, here's something you want to consider. This may migrate or reject because of this. Number 3, the piercing jewelry cannot be removed during the healing process. I don't care what the situation is, removing the jewelry and constantly replacing it, etc., is something that you can't do. So if you're involved in sporting activities or anything or a job that may require you to remove the jewelry for long periods of time, I'm not going to suggest that you do this piercing. Which kind of brings me to the next one. Number 4, can limit employment. It is a piercing that is going to be visible on your face and to everybody that you interact with. It isn't like an ear piercing where you might be able to pull your hair forward if your hair is long enough, or something is below the waist where nobody needs to know that you have it unless you, or below the neck, I should say. Nobody needs to know that you have it unless you actually show them. This piercing is going to be right out there in public view on a regular basis. So you need to be comfortable with that idea, and you have to understand that it may affect employment and it may cause some prejudice in some situations. So you should know that going in. Number 5 is kind of like the consultation. What I would go through if you came into my studio and asked to get this piercing, kind of what it's going to take to heal it, what my suggestions are, lifestyle changes, etc. First off, what I'm going to suggest for aftercare is doing hot compresses or soaks of warm water and sea salt twice daily for roughly about 10 minutes and then rinsing afterwards. Also cleaning it at least once a day with an antimicrobial or germicidal soap. Unless you know that you've contaminated the area, then I would suggest doing it a second time just to be on the safe side. Cross-contamination prevention, common sense stuff. Wash your hands before you handle it. Try to handle it by the ends whenever possible. The only time you need to have any contact with this piercing is when you are doing compresses or cleaning it. Rest of the time, leave it alone. Keep everybody else's germy little fingers away from it. Understand that microorganisms do move on the surface of your skin, so anytime you touch the area, you want to wash your hands before you do so. Keep no oral contact or exchanging of bodily fluids on or around the piercing. That does include your own saliva, so don't lick your fingers and clean things. That's disgusting. Keep your environment clean. Clothing, bedding, towels, anything that may come in contact with it. Not submerging the piercing. I don't suggest submerging the piercing in any body of water other than your own clean bathtub until it is completely healed. That means no swimming. Absolutely no swimming. I don't care how clean the water is or what the situation is. Anytime you submerge the piercing in a body of water that you can't control the environment, it's possibly going to become infected. You also want to keep pets away from it. Don't let them sleep in the bed with you. If you use anything that comes out of a spray can or squirt bottle in your hair, you want to shield it with folded paper towel. Now some kind of lifestyle changes. You want to avoid anything that puts pressure on the piercing, covers it, blocks the flow of oxygen to it, or constricts the movement. Basically, you want to avoid sleeping on the piercing. You want to sleep on your other side or your back, or figure out a way to elevate it off the bed. Like I mentioned earlier, it is a little bit easier with brow piercings, especially if you're a side sleeper, or a back sleeper, or even a stomach sleeper. If you turn your head this way, and the piercing's on this side, not in contact with the pillow. Anyway, if you have any type of activities that are going to require you to remove the jewelry for any extended period of time, I'm going to advise you not to do the piercing until after you are done with those activities. For example, if you're involved in any type of competitive sport or professional career, or maybe you're taking training or going to, like let's say nursing school would be a prime example, and they are going to, regardless of what your future employers may think, probably make you remove the jewelry, I would suggest waiting until after you're done. If you're involved with anything that's going to require you to cover the piercing, like with helmets, headgear, sweatbands, headbands, any type of goggles that might cover the area, I would really suggest waiting until after the piercing is healed, or after you're done with that activity to get the piercing. If you notice, this Slipknot thing back here, yes, I have pierced the majority of those band members. And a lot of them back in the 90s had their eyebrow pierced. And the constant mask problem, the fact that they couldn't keep them clean because they were on the road, and the fact they're sweating in them, and it's creating all kinds of fun-filled little bacterias and fungi and et cetera to collect in there. They constantly, and the constant rubbing against the piercing, they did have issues with the piercing for that particular reason. We got to the point with a couple of them where I just said, let's just take it out, and after you're done doing this and you have your time off from touring, then we'll talk about doing it again. And that worked best for them. Once they healed, they didn't seem to have any issues with it, but it's something to consider. Another life event that you may consider is any type of ceremonies that you have coming up where you need to present yourself in a dress-oriented area, like weddings. If you're planning in advance and you don't want to have that particular piercing in every photo, I would suggest waiting until after the wedding to get it pierced. If you are planning on going on a vacation, especially anywhere where you may in fact want to swim, wait until you get back to get it done. Jewelry. On this particular piercing, one of the issues I saw early on, especially when the popularity of barbells seemed to come into play, probably around 98 or 99, is that the straight barbells added a lot of pressure to the piercing and caused a lot of people to either have it start tearing, or have it actually migrate or reject completely out of the body. I really suggest rings or curved barbells so that part of the piercing is deep inside the brow. This piercing can migrate even if it's done correctly and even if you wear the correct jewelry. So you're kind of limited to those two types, but luckily for you, there are numerous versions of circular jewelry on the market, from cat bead rings to beaded rings to seamless rings to circular barbells in every material imaginable, from solid 18 karat gold all the way down to implant grade surgical stainless steel that will work in that piercing. Also, there's various different ends, and the same thing goes for the curved barbells. You can get very elaborate gem settings, very elegant settle ones, pretty much anything you can imagine in body piercing you can probably get for this particular piercing. You do kind of want to stick with a lighter piece of jewelry. I've really found over the years that 16 to 14 is usually your best bet. 18's fine. I've had plenty of people heal out the piercing with 18 and wore it for the rest of their life, or until they got tired of it. But when you start getting up into those thicker gauges, that increases the amount of pressure on the piercing, which generally can lead to some migration. One other thing you want to consider is if you do any type of activities that involve a lot of impact, like boxing, wrestling, anything where your face may come in contact with something else, this may not be the piercing for you. They can be ripped out. Any piercing can be ripped out. This one, because of its location, it tends to be a little bit more prone to that. And it will leave scarring. There is no way around it. I can usually tell if somebody's had their eyebrow pierced and had issues from the other side of the room in some cases. I hope this gives you enough information to make a educated decision on whether or not getting an eyebrow piercing is right for you. This piercing used to be extremely popular, and it's kind of waned in popularity. I think it's ready for a comeback. I've always liked the piercing. It's always been a fun piercing to do. And done on the right person, I really think it adds a lot to how they look and how they present themselves. And like I said earlier, it kind of draws that attention away from other things to your eye. So, all that's left for you to do is like the video if you liked it. If you have any questions, maybe I kind of breezed over something and didn't really go into it, please leave a comment. Happy to answer questions you may have. If you have something to add, leave a comment. I love discussing these matters. Piercing's my passion. Piercing's my life. So, let's talk about it. Also, subscribe. We post roughly 4 videos a week now on the subject, mostly on piercing right now. We are going to be expanding more into the tattoo side in the future, on body piercing, tattooing, body art, etc. with the emphasis on education. So if you're looking for answers, we might be one of those people that you want to subscribe to and hit that notification bell. Plus, we try to be entertaining to a degree. Other than that, you guys have a good day. Happy piercing. Hope all your piercings heal well. And if you're in the Des Moines, Iowa area, I hope to see you for your piercing needs in the future.